Hello everyone, my name is Nick Gelardi, and today I will be covering the first section of Chapter 9, which is addressing learners' individual needs. And this section in particular is very important because every student and child is different and you have to be able to accommodate for their needs. When you become a teacher, you must understand and appreciate students' unique learning and developmental needs. Today we're going to learn about the special issues and concerns of students at 3 developmental levels in particular: childhood, early adolescence, and late adolescence. And it is important to understand that these students will change as they develop and that their needs will reflect various intelligence levels, abilities, and disabilities. Now, how do students' needs change as they develop? Students develop at different rates. For example, some students will be more mature than others. Some students will have a higher learning rate. They'll learn faster, or they'll be able to do more sophisticated types of learning. We see it in elementary school and in middle school with gifted programs and honors classes. And it's important as a teacher to know which students are able to be better cognitively than others. There's different stages of development as well. For example, as children develop physically, their bodies undergo numerous changes and they use language and other symbols, systems to solve problems. As they develop socially, they learn to interact more efficiently with others. And as they develop morally, they learn from their actions to reflect a greater appreciation of principles such as justice, equality, and fairness. Now, 3 models in particular that we're going to be covering today help teachers better serve their students, better understand their students so they can serve their students better. And these 3 are Piaget's model of cognitive development, Erickson's model of psychosocial development, and Kohlberg's model of moral development. And we're going to start with Piaget's model of cognitive development. Now, Piaget made extensive observational studies of children and concluded that children reason differently from adults and even have different perceptions of the world than adults do. He found that children learn through interacting actively with other environments, as scientists do. They're more hands-on and they learn better, more hands-on ways than they would just listening to a lecture or anything like that, because their brains are not fully developed. And he proposed that a child's thinking progresses through a sequence of 4 cognitive stages. The first stage is sensorimotor intelligence. This occurs relatively from birth to 2 years old. And the behavior is primarily sensory and motor, very simple. And then pre-operational thought is 2 to 7 years old, and their development of their language and their conceptual development are evident. They're learning how to speak and talk and all of that. And concrete operations is from 7 to 11 years old, and here they develop their ability to use logical thought to solve concrete problems. They're starting to be able to think about more advanced problems and be able to start to think about solutions to these problems. And then from 11 to 15 years old is the formal operation stage. And this is where their cognitive abilities reach their highest level of development, and they're able to think about probably the more complex ideas and start learning some more advanced content. According to Piaget's theory, the rate of progress through these 4 stages varies from individual to individual. Obviously, everyone's going to be different. Every student that you have is going to learn different, is going to be different, and it's important to accommodate for that. Pre-operational, concrete operations, formal operations. There are some suggested strategies for these that we are going to look at now. So for the pre-operational stage, obviously it's just sensory and motor. So you would want to use concrete objects and visual aids and classifying group strategies as well. For example, maybe you'd want them to identify different shapes or different colors, and that would best serve their needs. For the concrete operation stage, remember this is 2 to 7 years old, you still want to use visual aids because they're still not fully developed and they will benefit more from that. But start using some short explanations with some good organization and clearness. Explain some more complex ideas and concepts through comparisons with familiar examples such as classifying and grouping more complex items just instead of a triangle or something like that. In the formal operation stage, you want to study topics in increasing depth, go beyond facts, and teach more complex ideas and theories that relate to the current world, and provide more sophisticated explanations for what students observe and experience. Discuss maybe more social and political or moral issues that relate to the subject matter, and then also have students test their hypotheses to any questions they may have. Now, moving on to the other stage of Erickson's model of psychosocial development is that it delineates 8 stages from infancy to old age, and for each stage, a psychosocial crisis is central in the individual's emotional and social growth. I have attached a link to this chart in the description of this video that will be in Brightspace or whatever, so if you want to follow along, you can. It is also in the book as well. But the first stage of these 8 stages is infancy, birth to 18 months, and the main psychosocial crisis for this age is trust versus mistrust, as they develop their drive and their hope during these ages. The next stage, early childhood, 18 months to 3 years old, their main psychosocial crisis is the autonomy versus shame, and they will learn self-control, courage, and will. Their play age, 3 to 6 years old, the crisis is initiative versus guilt, and they will be learning their purpose and direction. School age, 6 to 12 years old, industry versus inferiority, which will help them learn competitiveness and method. And then adolescence is the 5th stage, 12 to 20 years old, and this include their main crisis is identity versus role confusion, and their main strengths will be fidelity and devotion. Then as we get into the older ages, young adulthood, 20 to 35 years old, is intimacy versus isolation, and their basic strength would be love and affiliation. Now these older ages don't really relate to us teachers, but it's still important to know because as teachers, when we're older, these are going to be our main psychosocial crises. Mid-adulthood, 35 to 65 years old, the main crisis is generosity versus stagnation, and their strengths will be cure and production. And in late adulthood, 65 to death, is the main crisis integrity versus despair, and their basic strengths would be wisdom and acceptance. Now moving on to the second model that we're going to cover today is Kohlberg's model of moral development. Now according to Lawrence Kohlberg, the reasoning process people use to decide what is right and what is wrong evolves through 3 levels of development. With each level, Kohlberg has identified 2 stages. So the first level of development for Kohlberg's model of moral development would be the pre-conventional level or moral reasoning. Now, a child is responsive to cultural rules and labels of good and bad, or right or wrong, but interprets these in terms of consequences of actions. So the first stage in this level of development would be punishment and obedience orientation. Now, this is very common for all children with their parents. Obviously, when you do something wrong, your parents are going to let you know and they're going to punish you for it so that you learn from their mistakes. And this is very common in this stage. In the stage 2, which is the more advanced version of this level, it would be instrumental relativist orientation, which is basically means that if you do something right, it will be reciprocal to the other person, and they will do right things for you as well. So it's just taking that stage 1 a little bit further into a more advanced psychological element. The second level of development is the conventional level of moral reasoning, where maintaining the expectations of the individual's family, group, or nation is perceived as valuable regardless of the consequences. Now, stage 3, the less advanced stage of this level, would be interpersonal concordance orientation, which is basically just the idea that good behavior which pleases others is approved by them and appreciated by them. And stage 4 would be the law and order orientation, which would take this concept a step further and say that the right behavior is part of your duty as a citizen and the respect for authority. And the third level of development would be post-conventional, autonomous, or principled level of moral reasoning, which is the effort to define moral principles that have validity and application apart from the authority of groups. Stage 5, the less advanced theory of this, would be social contract legalistic orientation, which is basically just the American Constitution and the standards that are within that. And stage 6 would be the universal ethical principle orientation, which is the right is in accord. The right things or choices are in accord with self-chosen ethical principles, appealing to logic and universality. So basically, what your moral standards are apply to everybody else universally and is widely regarded as the nice thing to do. Kohlberg also suggests that the following three conditions can help children internalize these moral principles. One would be exposure to the next higher stage of reasoning. Then the second one would be the exposure to situations posing problems and contradictions for the child's current moral structure, leading to dissatisfaction with his or her current level and the improvement of these levels. And the third thing would be an atmosphere of interchange and dialogue, combining the first two conditions, in which conflicting moral views are compared in an open manner. One approach to teaching values and moral reasoning is known as character education, which is very, very important. A movement that promotes the teaching of core values that can be taught directly through the course curriculum, especially in literature, social studies, and social science classes. Now, there's a lot of approaches to character education that you could take. Now, when you're thinking about character education, you want to think about the best environment for your students and the best ways you could teach them or just get to know them on a personal level that will benefit them the most. So take the time to pause this video for a minute or two, and then we will discuss some of the character education strategies that you may think will be best served, and see if you thought of any of them. All right, so the first one is the teacher being a caregiver, model, or a mentor to a student. You also could have a caring classroom community, a lot of togetherness in the classroom so that no one really feels left out. A character-based discipline, if you want to emphasize moral values rather than just pure intelligence in the classroom. A democratic classroom environment where students have a say in what goes on, and it's a more interactive learning experience. Teaching character through the curriculum, which would mean applying moral principles to the content that the students are learning. Cooperative learning, which is basically like group work or having students interact with each other to learn the material. Conscience of craft, which is basically just making the students aware of what they are doing. Ethical reflection, which basically applies moral standards to everything that you do within the class and allows students to think about how their morals are affecting this content or whatever you're learning in the class. And some other things would be teaching conflict resolution, caring beyond the classroom, looking out for your students beyond the classroom, making sure they're okay at home. That's a very good strategy. Creating a positive moral culture within the school, making sure everyone feels included and safe, and having a good relationship with the parents and working with the parents to help the children as well. Any of these methods would work. This is part of the 12-point system that was described in the book. And yeah, Maslow's model of hierarchy of needs is what we're going to jump to next. I have also placed a link to this as well, this chart as well, so you can follow along. It is also in the book too. So a psychologist, Abraham Maslow, formulated a model of hierarchy of needs, suggesting that people are first motivated by basic needs for survival and safety. Now, this applies more to just people in general in the world, but it's also important to know because it gives you an idea of how your students and the children will act in class and what they will prioritize based on what ages they are at. So the most common need at the bottom of the triangle, the deficiency needs, would be a physiological, and then it would go up one to safety and belongingness and love, and then their self-esteem needs. And then at the top of the triangle, it would be their growth needs or their being needs, which would be their need to know and understand and comprehend stuff, their aesthetic, and their self-actualization at the very top. Now, moving on to the developmental stresses and tasks of childhood. Children gain a sense of industry needed at this age by playing seriously, mastering new skills, and producing products and being workers. Is childhood a time of carefree play or a period of success? Is the main question that you have to ask yourself. And it depends really on the life circumstances of the child and personality of the child. Every child is different, and some children may be more akin to being serious, but some may also may need to master new skills in a new way, in a fun way. As mentioned in my lesson back in chapter 3, actually, the studies, adverse childhood experiences, they document how children's development can be impacted if their families are coping with financial problems, drug addictions, domestic violence, or any of those problems. And that is important to note as well. The developmental stresses and tasks of adolescence. Now, adolescence contains two distinct stages: an early period concerning the ages of 10 to 12 through the ages of 14 to 16, and a late period from 15 to 16 through 19. Now, this includes more of Erickson's model of psychosocial development, and the fact that identity versus role diffusion is the psychosocial crisis for the adolescence years. Now, adolescents identify themselves with a peer group or a school or with a cause, and their sense of fidelity is very clear and strong during these ages. They're starting to find their way in life. They have a very strong desire to achieve independence, and their vulnerability of today's adolescence is evident. And we as teachers need to take an energetic, creative, and multifaceted approach to better serve them. For example, you might want to provide opportunities and encouragement for students to develop competence, or promote the development of positive self-concept or a high self-esteem, encouraging students to be happy with themselves and to have some confidence, which will help them in the long run, and to intervene or prevent problems that place students at risk. And that is the end of this presentation. Just a quick recap of some important vocabulary that you might want to jot down or find or relook over in the textbook would be the stages of development, pre-operational stage, the concrete operating stage, the formal operation stage, and the character education stage. Thank you everyone for listening, and have a great day.